Hello and welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your week to join Rockwell Automation on this informational session for educational partners and learning partnerships. My name is Nick Putman, and I'll be your host and moderator as we go through today's conversation. The audio for today's webinar will be streamed through your computer speakers. So please make sure that you have your volume turned up and your speakers are on. Your mic will automatically be muted and will remain muted throughout the duration of the webinar. Your camera will also be disabled. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll address them throughout the presentation and at the end. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a question and answer box. If you have any questions, please put those there as they come up, and our team of panel experts will work to answer those as quickly as possible. Lastly, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available after the presentation is completed. We will be sending out a recording to all invitees, and that can be forwarded to those colleagues that were unable to join today. Thank you, and we look forward to the next 45 minutes to an hour with you. So in the automation industry, there's really an increasing expectation that tasks, clicks, predictable actions, that these are all automated. Right? There's a rise in API-based workflows in design, deployment, testing, and validation. Global users around the world desire access to each other's work at any moment. Traceability, history of changes, and contributions should be readily available. More frequent, rapid experimentation is a demand, not just a nice to have anymore. An increased exposure of applications prior to deployment is a requirement. So these are all of the human expectations of what really drives Rockwell Automation and companies like Rockwell to adapt and deliver automation solutions fit for the needs of today's people. Validating the needs of today's people and today's engineers, thinkers, organizations, and companies are really prioritizing their spending in areas aligned with modernizing their development and design tools and increasing collaboration. Nearly 90% of all companies in the manufacturing industries that we work with are investing and adapting modern workforce now. Today, we want to explore some of the opportunities offered by Rockwell Automation and introduce those platforms that Rockwell has based learning trainings on top of for modern and digital design platforms. Today, we kick off the first session of our educational program learning series. The Educational Partnership Team is looking for new ways to engage our community of professors, instructors, movers and doers to learn about new offerings aligned with our industry's expectations. In today's call, we'd like to cover an overview of how Rockwell Automation brings educational opportunities to you. We'll hear from Marzel on that topic. We also would like to explore Rockwell's SaaS or software as a service strategy. We'll start with an overview of how the educational teams can adopt those. And then we'd like to take a deeper dive into one of our modern design platforms, FactoryTalk Design Studio. Lastly, we'll close with some of the tools that you have at your disposal today and talk about the ways to adopt some of these new offerings that Rockwell is presenting to you. We really hope that you find today's presentation as well as this series useful and welcome any feedback following the session on how we can better engage you. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Marzel Brown from our academic and educational partner programs. We have Sean Stewart, a platform lead, setting and understanding some of the market trends and setting direction for our strategic software platforms, and Jack Ettinger, who's in our early career program focused on customer experience and adoption. And with that, I'd like to introduce Marzel, our first speaker in today's presentation. Marzel.
Thank you, Nick, for that intro. We can go to our first slide around the academic enablement team. So welcome, everybody. I'll spend a couple minutes talking about our academic team and what the EDU program is all about. So in our space, we want to make sure that we are bringing our connected systems to life in the education space. And that's what our team is here to do and support everybody with. I mean, the way we do this is through, sustainable access to our software, our hardware, all of our new technologies that are coming out in a pretty diverse way to make sure we're not just at those top elite schools, but across whether they're 2-year or 4-year or even our K-12 space. So we're just making sure that those topics are there and provided. This isn't done alone. I mean, we do this with partners. across our business units and our ecosystems out there with our distributors and some of our other educational suppliers, and you'll see that as well. And lastly, we support our schools because we know the important role around credentialing and certifications that are out there today, more than ever before. I mean, with the workforce gaps we're seeing, and how we upskill our incumbent workers and our next generation of engineers and thinkers, I mean, that credentialing is really important as well. And these are just a couple examples of where we have full systems in place at some of our universities. We won't mention any of their names. It's not the point here, although they're on the slide, but that's where we are showing all those technologies in place. You can go to the next slide real quick. And so what is the educational support program? Well, most people on this call will know a little bit about it because that's how you got invited to these webinars, or through being part of our educational support program. But it's in place to make sure that we provide low-cost solutions to our schools so that they are using our next generation of software and hardware in those spaces. Those schools can be, like we mentioned before, they could be a high school, a career center, 2 to 4 year institutions, any of those government type places that are teaching our technologies to people. It can't be a company, right? And that's one of the things we want to make sure people understand, that it can't be you're using this to make product and for profit. The systems there also, like we talked about, are around our software, hardware, our learning platforms, and we'll spend a couple seconds on the learning platforms and some of the new additions to this program. And so whether you are been in the program for some years or new, this thing is evolving every day. And so if you haven't touched and been a part of our EDU program for some years and you just go in and renew your software every year, there's probably some time to look at some of the things that we have added in the last couple of years. So if you go to the next slide. One of those will be around Learning Plus. I think this is a huge advantage to our schools. It gives you the opportunity to access the training that our customers are sending their employees to. It's current, it's maintained, and it's the same topics that those folks are learning and getting educated on through Rockwell. At the end of each one, there's a sort of completion at the end of them, and those are things that, again, go on a student's resume that makes them a little bit more marketable when they're leaving your institutions. This slide here is just the steps of how you would get in and access Learning Plus. If we go to the next slide, I'll just show you an example of what we're doing. So a customer would sign up for one of these courses and take them. The advantage that the EDU program provides to our schools is that your students will have access to every last one of the courses for one cost for 12 months. And that is a huge advantage. So if you collaborate with other instructors at your institutions, you can say, hey, Nick, I'm teaching these courses this semester, you're teaching these other ones the next semester. Let's figure out what control or motion or visualization classes or even networking that we can collaborate on and get our students, not just through our classes, but also through the Rockwell courses and those certs on their resumes when they're walking out of our schools to say that we finished these classes that their customers are going through. So this is one that you might want to look at as we finish this session out and talk to us through. And the last one I'll touch on, if you go one more slide, this is another really important one to me personally, and it's around the software. So most schools that are on this call are using our software every day. And we have changed a couple things in there so that we've even brought that cost of our software down even more. And what I wanted to just touch on real quick before I hand this back over to Nick is that in the classroom, there's a classroom toolkit and a student toolkit that you can leverage. And the difference now that I really want to be vocal about is you only need one classroom toolkit in each lab, and the rest are student toolkits, whether you're putting them on a lab machine or a student is taking it home with them. So next time you're updating your software for the year, you need one per lab, that's up the classroom, and the rest are student. And that'll be a big win for you when you see where I'm headed with that one. So those are just a couple things I want to talk to you about with the ED program. There'll be a slide later about how to contact us if you want to dig into some things around your particular program. So I'll turn it back over to you, Nick.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcel. Really appreciate the overview. I'd like to spend just a few minutes and kind of introduce software as a service, or SaaS, to our partners here, and talk a little bit about Rockwell's strategy in that space, right? So if we kind of think back to some of those accelerators that we talked about in the introduction, right? Access, emulation, automated work, collaboration, right? What we really did was introduce the human desires in the modern workforce, and how that translates for us as automation providers is the need for platforms that can do what you see on the screen here, right? We're looking for platforms that can be deployed and scaled easily, that have flexible architecture models, that provide financial predictability and really enable the next generation of engineers. So these market trends lend themselves to cloud hosted and cloud native solutions, and that's really what we'd like to talk about here over the next few minutes with you on. Before we do, just kind of talking about how does SaaS compare to the existing software solutions that you're using today in your classrooms, right? So you may be and are likely using some hardware that has embedded software, right? This is absolutely not a bring your own device model. This is configured by software that can be oftentimes version locked. It's typically for single purpose, right? It has limited capabilities or capacity to adopt new features and capabilities as they're brought into the fold, but it's really good for that single purpose, right? It's isolated, they're robust, and these are proven solutions. So they absolutely have a place. Next is the local computer, right? So this is something that you typically, if you're in charge of helping support labs or infrastructure for teaching, this is something that you would really share a lot of the responsibility with IT on, and some of the responsibility starts to scale with IT. So while you may be responsible for helping select and make decisions and implement the software solutions for automation into the computer labs and training centers, IT likely owns the local computer. And again, we're kind of talking about shared ownership here, as where that embedded software option really would have been owned by somebody within the department. As we kind of move down the progression to the on-premise compute, or this is sometimes called private cloud, right? There's a much larger initial hardware or capital investment here. It does scale more elegantly than local PCs, right? So we don't have the same scale with IT every time we want to add another student workstation. This is technology that oftentimes is deployed by tools like Citrix or Horizon from VMware in the industrial space, sometimes even with Thin Manager. But again, these are often tools that are holistically IT managed and rely very heavily on your IT teams, within your organizations, within your universities to facilitate. What we want to talk a little bit more about today is SaaS, right? Software as a service. So this really provides no need for expensive hardware. It is by nature a much more collaborative environment. Nobody at your institution is necessarily responsible for maintenance and maintaining of the software solution itself. We will talk about how software as a service could kind of be broken down into two categories as well, right? So you could have cloud hosted and cloud native applications, and I will talk a little bit about both. But what does that really mean for education? I think the key here is that there's just an ease of adoption of these technologies and tools, whether it's for full-blown training purposes or just for people to be able to try this out, right? You can trial tools before you're building out lesson plans. You can get your hands on and attempt and poke around with platforms without having to make hardware or software upgrades in a lab, right? You're getting access to platforms with nothing more than a modern web browser and internet access. So how is Rockwell approaching SaaS, or software as a service? Rockwell's launched what's called the Factory Talk Hub. And what the Factory Talk Hub is, it's really the place that you go to receive your services, right? It's not something that you buy, it's where do you go to receive those services. The hub has software that's really created in two ways. So we talked about cloud hosted and cloud native. There's a lot of cloud hosted software that's available in the hub. The way that gets there is through a process that's that we call internally kind of as the lift and shift, if you will. But this is really taking software that you may have leveraged before, such as Studio 5000, and making it cloud hosted so that it's more easily accessible. So for anybody out there that's installed multiple versions of Studio 5000 on a laptop before, you're probably already and immediately realizing some of the time savings that you have in front of you when leveraging a cloud hosted Studio 5000 offering. The other half of that is cloud native applications. And these are really built with the cloud in mind from the ground up, right? They tend to be more collaborative in nature, tend to take more advantages of cloud advances and things that the cloud has to offer, right? So the hub platform itself will help connect data that's generated from the design phase of the application. And this will really scale all the way through operations and into maintenance, right? Not all of our customers, at Rockwell and not all of our institutions that we work with will have the ability to do all of these things on their own, build custom apps and do all of that in the cloud. So we really want to try to help fill those gaps. It also really enables partnerships with groups like original equipment manufacturers or OEMs that we do work with closely today on the design side to start thinking about how can they scale their services through the operate and maintain functions of a platform design. So again, what does the hub do? What is it? It's really the way that we're bringing the customer, bringing manufacturing, bringing the plant to the cloud. We're adding, the capacity for people to deliver analytics closer to real time as well, and also being through the whole process, we're able to start introducing technologies like AL and ML with without having to bear the burden of the massive compute demand and the change in hardware that may be required to do that otherwise. So for our topics today, one of the things that we'd like to spend a little bit of time on is the design hub. We won't touch on products in the operation or maintenance hub today, but the design hub itself really focuses in kind of key 5 areas, right? This is all the way from the conceptualization and architecture, drawing and design of a functional system, all the way out through a functional production unit, right? That's really where Design Hub functions and the products within it fit. So I'd like to briefly introduce some of the products that are offered in the Design Hub that, again, help us with those easily integrated tools through on-demand testing, virtual commissioning, and again, into a even remote deployment of a solution. Again, for exposure, some of the products that are contained within what we call the FactoryTalk Twin Studio, which is really like a end-to-end automation design solution where users can design, program, simulate, emulate, and virtually commission all in the same environment. It provides projects like Studio 5000 Logix Designer for controlled design. Again, this is one of those kind of, as I mentioned, the lift and shift where we've taken what was traditionally something that was either hosted on a laptop in your labs or hosted, in a server in that, on-premise or private cloud type offering, and moved it into the cloud for easier access and less to maintain for yourself. This does allows our users to develop projects, faster. You can move more seamlessly across the different projects, and does start to introduce more collaborative nature, even when we're just talking about those applications that are cloud hosted. You'll see the additional advantages when Sean comes on and talks to us about a cloud native application, FactoryTalk Design Studio. Quickly moving across the bottom there, we can see some of the design software. We see some of the emulation software as well. So available to you also is FactoryTalk Echo. Echo is it's the closest emulation to a physical Logix controller that we have. So unlike what was available in some of the previous emulation or simulation capabilities, this platform really does provide an accurate representation of exactly what would happen in a Logix controller. Instead of recompiling your project code and running that for an emulated controller, we're actually able to run real controller code in the emulated environment. So a lot of great advantages. And again, something you can take advantage of without installing or maintaining anything locally. Maybe last but not least that I'll introduce here is Emulate 3D. You see this on the fun little video there that's kind of shown on the right, and it's a tool that's really used for designing and testing and redefining your design and your model to create automation systems in the visual world. But now that we've talked about a few of those solutions, I'd like to maybe click into the Factory Talk Hub. So this is what you'd expect to see if you go out to cloud.rockwellautomation.com, you sign into the Factory Talk Hub with your unified experience, and you'll see the various different platforms and products that are available. These are what we call tiles, and what we'd like to spotlight for you today is Factory Talk Design Studio. So if I fictitiously click into Design Studio, I'd like to bring Sean onto the screen and have Sean introduce to you Design Studio. Thanks, Sean.
Great, thanks, Nick. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. And, really, I always like to level set and ask, what is Factory Talk Design Studio and why would I need that for my curriculum? And I'm going to spend most of the time discussing what Factory Talk Design Studio is. So I'll kind of start with that second question and why should I add it to my curriculum first? So if you go ahead and go to that next slide, Nick. And we saw this slide earlier, Nick presented it, but it's really important because digital transformation is happening and it's happening at all of our manufacturing partners. And we just want to make sure that Rockwell Automation is there to help you guys with that transformation as well, because our educational partners are really the front line of providing that next generation workforce that's going to have to live with this digital transformation. So that's kind of the reason why it should be important. If you go to the next slide, Nick, and we'll talk a little bit more about what it is. And so you already mentioned this, but I just wanted to make it very clear is that a lot of that product or the product that you're familiar with might be Studio 5000 Logix Designer. That's really our on-premise programming tool. What I'm going to talk about is that cloud native tool, right? So it's Factory Talk Design Studio, and this is completely cloud native SaaS offering. So if you go to the next slide. And so nearly every presentation that we provide on Factory Talk Design Studio, we have what we affectionately call the 3M slide. And we're going to talk about why Factory Talk Design Studio is modern. It's a multi-user and multi-controller solution. So instead of just talking through it, I'll give you a couple more details. If you go to the next slide there, Nick. And we'll start really with our modern slide. And this is really important because it's what we're seeing in the users today is that we really need to have more of an object-oriented programming method for programming automation software. A lot of the folks coming out of school today, they're very familiar with these concepts and higher level programming, but it's something new when it comes to automation. So when you talk about object-oriented programming, most people are like, yeah, we've been doing that since the 90s. And you do things like classes and interfaces and all these different types of concepts that you're used to. When it comes to automation, we program a little bit differently. So we're trying to bring that same object-oriented programming concepts of things like programs and routines, add-on instructions, and something we call smart objects. Another thing that we're trying to do in that kind of modern mindset is, once again, a lot of the younger folks coming out of school today are very familiar with text-based programming. I find it kind of funny because when I was in school, that's all we had was text-based programming, but it seems like we're coming full circle and we're coming right back to that. People are familiar with, programming in things like Python or C#. And that's something that's kind of different when it comes to automation programming. So what you'll see is that we have what's called a domain-specific language that backs up Factory Talk Design Studio. And what you'll do is you'll actually render that text into the graphics, the graphics that most people are used to in automation, things like ladder logic. And then that final thing on the bottom, browser-based, anytime, anywhere, as a cloud-native SaaS offering, Factory Talk Design Studio is browser-based. So you never require any software downloads or installations. It's just access through your normal web browser, which is kind of nice. So that not only removes kind of the user's burden of installing and maintaining it, which helps out those instructors who have to do that oftentimes, but it also allows kind of that anytime, anywhere connection. So one thing that we've heard from some of the schools we've talked to is that students would like to have access outside of the classroom or outside of the lab. When you have that browser-based SaaS solution, you now have that, and it's something you can offer your students. If you go to the next slide, Nick. Great, thank you. So on multi-user, when you're working in a system environment where there's multiple users making changes at the same time, version control is critical. And one of the key features that FactoryTalk Design Studio has is an integrated version control system, and we power that with Git technology. So this integrated version control system allows for a multi-user collaboration while allowing the users to share code while maintaining code synchronization. So I'm going to highlight some of those features when we actually get into the product. One other aspect is that FactoryTalk Design Studio includes integrated project tracking, which allows users to see all their local changes and as well as remote changes by other members of the team. So you can merge your local edits with the shared project, which were made by other users. And this feature provides design flexibility and improved collaboration while developing your applications. Additionally, FactoryTalk Design Studio provides integrated library management, which allows for users to standardize their code. So we talked about that whole idea of using object-oriented programming. Well, one of the things we need is to have those library objects that we can create, that we can reuse. So having integrated library management is part of that. So I think, do I need to check the Q&A?
I think we're okay for now, Sean.
Okay, I'll keep going then.
A couple questions on the EDU program, maybe for Marzel, and we'll either touch on those in chat or review those at the end, but I think you're good to keep going. So
okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. And so the next thing we want to talk about is multi-controller. And when you're talking about multi-controller, we're looking now at a system-focused approach, right? So FactoryTalk Design Studio enables multiple controllers and being able to manage those in a single project. So programs can be allocated individually, really based on what the execution requirements of the project are. This feature kind of improves logical project organization and deployment. So we're really moving from an execution view to a logical view of your project. And additionally, rather than just having to match your software revision to the controller, FactoryTalk Design Studio supports multiple controller revisions in a single project. So we can have a single software platform across many hardware revisions. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide, Nick. So one thing that's pretty exciting about having this cloud native product is that we can get updates out much quicker. And the good part about that is you don't have to install those every time we come out with a new update. Those are already there because you're accessing this through the cloud and through your web browser. So we do this each quarter. If you go ahead and go to the next slide, we released FactoryTalk Design Studio in October of 2022. So we've been out about 18 months now. And with that, we've had 6 updates. Each quarter we have an update. So the first one we had, I don't have it on here, was just for some bug fixes and just a couple of features that our early adopters had asked for. But if you kind of look through, we're adding new value each quarter. So we started with integrating into the Vault, which is one of those items in the FactoryTalk Hub. We've done quite a bit of work with device management and configuration, and also done some enhancements to our version control. So these are all the things that are going on, and each quarter we're going to have more. So there's always going to be things that are new and exciting is coming out, and you don't have to wait for them or actually do anything to have those implemented in your system. So you go ahead and go to the next screen, and we're going to actually show what some of this is going to look like. So this is a picture, Nick had shown this earlier. This is a picture of the FactoryTalk Hub. And if you select, Nick, the FactoryTalk Design Studio card, and as that comes up, and we're going to have this first slide here, which actually shows really where you'll start. And these are the recent projects that I've used, right? That's what's in the middle. But you could also either create a new project or open some other projects that are older. And yeah, thank you for go ahead and selecting that first one. That's going to take us to what you're going to probably expect to see in an editor. So in the editor here that we have, you can see in the middle is the canvas, and this is where the editor canvas is. This is where you'll make your changes, do your programming. Over on the right-hand side, there's a toolbox and some properties. We'll talk about that here in a second. But on the left, you'll see the project tree. And what's a little bit different about this, not yet, but what's a little different about this will be, this is really that logical layout that we were talking about. We are just looking at how our particular cell is going to run. In this particular case, it's a clean in place cell. We're doing this logically, not based on what the execution is going to be. So Nick, you're one step ahead of me. If you go ahead and go down to that next icon on the left-hand side, we're going to look now at our devices. And here you can see that I've actually set up two devices. These are two controllers. So even though it's a single project, we actually have two controllers as part of that. You can add I/O here. You can add some of the other devices. That was what would be added in our devices view. If you go down to the next icon down there in the execution view, this is where you're going to be seeing something that might look a little bit like Logix Designer if you're familiar with that. And here you can see actually how each one of those programs are going to execute in your controllers. Now I have it expanded out here so you can actually see that first program. And the thing that's nice about that first program is you don't lose kind of the link back to your logical system design. You can see there it says SIP 100 dot whatever. That's really a link back to your logical model that you set up. And if you go down to the library books, Nick, we can show you what the library aspects look like. So we talked about that there was an integrated library. So we right now have the ability to do add-on instructions and user-defined data types, but we also have this thing called smart objects, and that's a new container that we have for doing that object-oriented programming. So we can create those objects here in the library and instantiate those and reuse those in our project. So if you go back up to our system view, if you could, Nick. Great, and then go down to the sequence, and we want to actually take a look at what the editor looks like. So we've now opened up one of our routines, and you can see that this is what you would probably expect from an editor. I don't want to lose the fact, though, that we're still just in our browser, and this is all accessible through the browser. Now, one of the things I didn't mention this earlier, but when we were talking about the ability to have this through the browser and to do things, the students could see this, any place they have access to a browser, right? That's all they need is that internet access, and they could be using this product outside of the lab or outside of the classroom. So it's kind of a nice feature that if they want to have access to it, they're not going to be necessarily linked to that lab environment. Now, let's say we want to add a new instruction here, and just so we go ahead and click, and I think it'll go and move forward, and you'll see that we're going to just drag from our toolbox. We'll put in a new XIC. We're just going to call this SIP complete and hit enter. And when that's done, you'll see it's just that easy that you can be making changes right there from the browser in your automation system. If you want to go ahead and advance the slide one. Now this looks, I'm not expecting you to be able to read this very well, but what I wanted to show here is this is that textual representation or the domain specific language that backs up all that graphical view that you see. So if you wanted to, we're not going to do it today, just at a time, but you could go in here and start typing your instructions for those students or those people who like using the textual editor. You could do that right here, and it's going to render back into the graphical display. So if you go ahead and go forward one more time. The last thing I want to kind of highlight here is the whole thing that we were talking about our version control. So if you click one more time, Nick, and you can see up here these icons, they're a little hard to see, but right here is part of our integrated version control system. So this gives us the ability to commit, push and pull changes, or even look at our change history. If you click one more time, Nick, you'll also see that we have a status down in the bottom right-hand corner. So we know that there might be remote changes available. This is where you're working in that collaborative environment. I think this is really useful. If you hit one more time, we can see our change history. And so you can see here that there's different things that have taken place in this project. So Jose David, he was the one who originally copied this in for me. I've made some changes myself. I have another account, so it has a different email address, but you can see there that I've also made changes from that other account, and you'll see a little cloud symbol next to it. So it's showing that there is changes that I made in the other account that are ready to be merged into this project. I think this ability to have this collaborative a way to work would be really helpful, especially if you're doing, let's say, a class project or a senior project that you might have several students working on the same project together. This will give them that ability to do that, all working individually, but still working collaboratively. And then I think I have one more slide, Nick. You could fast forward. Oh, thank you. And I just wanted you guys to know that people are using this right now. We have customers in the field who are using it on real systems that are being installed today. So we want you to know that, you know, this is something that's coming, and we're pretty excited about it. And we're going to see more and more features being implemented in FactoryTalk Design Studio. And with that, I'll turn it over, I think, to Jack.
Thanks, Sean. All right, so we've covered a lot of great information today, and next couple slides, I want to recap everything that we've got, what's available to you, and how you get access to it. So first thing, FactoryTalk Design Studio is available right now, complimentary to for educational use, complimentary access. So if you want to try it out for yourself, you want to try it out with your class, and I want to stress this last option. And if you think you're going to want to try it, you're like, I've got some time this summer, I'm definitely want to play around with that and explore. Or you think maybe next semester, I'm going to be able to incorporate this in my curriculum. Even if you're thinking you're doing it in the future, I want you to reach out to your distributor today, pick up the phone, send them an email, contact them today, get the process started for that no cost entitlement now, so that when the time comes and you want to start using the software, you're good to go and you can just get started. Next, recording for this webinar will be sent out in a follow-up email after this call. In addition to the recording, we will also be including the FactoryTalk Design Studio Education Intro Kit. What we've got in the intro kit is really special and something that I'm excited to share with you. So what we've included is a YouTube lecture style presentation prepared by Sean covering cloud, software as a service, and doing a sort of deep dive into FactoryTalk Design Studio like we did today, but even more so. We've also got the supporting slides and content that Sean presents in that video will also be shared, as well as a reading check style quiz. And what the goal that we have with that is to give you options. We want to make this as easy as possible for you to bring FactoryTalk Design Studio into your classroom this semester, whatever shape that takes. And we want to give you options for how to do that. So if you don't have time for an extra lecture this semester, you can give your students the video and the reading quiz as a homework assignment, and they can do that on their own time. Alternatively, if you want to present the material yourself, you can watch the video presentation, see how we present the content, and then use those supporting slides and materials to give the lecture yourself, tweak them how you like, give that presentation yourself to your students. Go to the next slide. So at the beginning of this call, we heard from Marzell Brown, who told you about all the fantastic ways you can get involved with the Rockwell EDU team. We've got lots of offerings with Rockwell software toolkits, hardware products, Learning Plus, and Emulate 3D, all at education discounts. So if you want to take advantage of those things, and even if you're already taking advantage of them, but we just want to make sure you're up to date, please reach out to your distributor or check out on the Rockwell My Software portal and make sure you're getting the latest and greatest EDU content. Next slide. There are so many ways to learn with Rockwell. From trying out the FactoryTalk Hub complimentary, you can try it out after we get off this call, to Learning Plus modules, but there's one more opportunity I want to especially highlight for you today, and that is we are looking for early adopters who want to incorporate Design Studio into their classroom, but they want to go even further than just doing a lecture and a video and a reading quiz. We have hands-on lab content that we want to share and want to partner with you to deliver to your students in a more extended format, get more in-depth, really work with the software and help the students see the possibilities that design studios bring to the table. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, we would love it if you'd contact us. The early adopter email address at the top of this slide. We'd love it if you'd reach out and we'll be in touch. No recap is complete without a standalone one-slide summary of all the options and what you got to do. So to recap, webinar recording, Factory Talk Design Studio intro kit, that's going to be coming in a follow-up email. If you're interested in working with the education team, partnership, support, materials, discounted EDU pricing, I want you to contact your distributor or go through the My Rockwell software portal. If you're interested in the Factory Talk Design Studio hands-on labs and even more advanced content, please reach out to the early adopters Rockwell email address. And if you want to explore Learning Plus modules or you want to try Factory Talk Design Studio for yourself, again, reach out to your local distributor for that. I've got the links in plain text in this slide. If you're going to screenshot one slide in this whole presentation, this is the slide you want to screenshot. Take that screenshot now. We'll give it a couple seconds and then Nick's going to take us out.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Jack. Thank you all. And thank you to everybody on the phone for your participation. We definitely got some time for Q&A and there were some really good ones that came in. So Marzel, maybe if we could start, there was a couple good questions that came in around our EDU program and support there. One around certifications associated with Learning Plus, and then another just kind of discussing the normal costs for a year of classroom toolkit. Would you help us out with both of those?
Yeah. So I'll start with the easy one. So on the classroom toolkit piece, what you want to do is, and you can't hold me to an exact dollar amount because it changes a little bit based on just cost each year. But if we walk through a yearly example, you would look at a classroom toolkit, which would be $200 and something for that one license per year. And then all the other licenses are about $40 a license per year for your classroom. So I know in the past that has not been what schools pay for. So we've lowered that cost. We've worked with our business units to get that cost down. Another example of that would be Emulate 3D. It's like 99% off cost with Emulate 3D as far as incorporating that into the classroom, whether that's with digital twins or using models just to help students understand a project a little deeper, because you can't build out a bunch of workstations. You can build it out in emulation, connect it to our controller that is running the code that they're learning, and then that would be a good solution as well. The second one you talked about was certifications. I want to be very clear. The e-learning courses that we shared in this slide deck, at the end of each one of those courses, there is a cert of completion that you get, but those are stackable up to an assessment. So if you go out to Rockwell's webpage and go into support, and under the training section, you will see the stackables that those courses will allow for your students to obtain, like a programmer or a maintainer, for example. A lot of customers will have their employees go get a programmer maintainer. Those courses will fall up to that. And then there was one more, Nick, around hardware in the EDU program. I just say to you, we're working daily with our business units on hardware and software. I think I've said that probably 5 times now. If you were to go to your distributor and you place an EDU order for hardware and something does not look right, please give us a call and we can work through that with you, because yeah, that was a miss on hardware that you couldn't get for your classroom. So I'm asking you to follow up with us now, even on that one. But if something doesn't look right, just give us a shout, because sometimes our distributors just don't have all the answers, or they just may not be up to date with them. So please give us a call when you get a chance on things like that. I hope those answered your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Marcel. And hey, one more late question about software, not hardware, but inclusion of Plex in the partner program or in the educational program. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to Plex as well. Yeah, so Plex is in the pipeline of software that is supported. And if you have a chance, there's one called the Connected Worker. There's a webinar on it on our site. Please just go Google that on Rockwell site and look at Connected Worker. And that's, I think, our first way of getting Plex into systems in the classroom.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcel. Next, we will shift just a little bit to the technology. Saw some great questions from Brad and others, and see, Sean, that you were working on those. But Sean, would you mind? I think this was a great question about, hey, when we talk about multi-controller, is that including HMI? And then, how about sharing data across, and data structures across platforms? So you mentioned, some of the work that's being done with Design Studio and Optics, but would you mind just kind of elaborating on, the interconnectivity today in our plans a little bit, Sean?
Sure. So all along, this is meant to, FactoryTalk Design Studio is meant to be like a full solution for your automation needs. So that ability to communicate with the controller and with the HMI, we're looking at it as more of a system design as opposed to individual components design. So it's not there yet, right? We've released FactoryTalk Design Studio. FactoryTalk Optics came out about the same time, but the intent is always to bring those together as a single solution for your project. So yeah, it'll definitely be there. It's just not there yet. I know we got some guys behind the scenes who are listening to this presentation, and they're working on that right now. So it's definitely in our plans.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Maybe one last one for Marzel that I see coming in here. Any benefit or support for multiple year purchases on anything out of the educational program?
Yeah, so you can, if you want, you can purchase your software up to 5 years at one time. So if you're sitting on a grant, for example, if you're writing for a grant in that grant cycle and you wanted to secure over 5 years, up to 5 years, you can do that with your software access. Another option, and some schools are doing this, where they'll teach fall, recall those licenses and apply them to spring. You can do things of that nature as well. So that's all done through that commerce portal. That helps answer the question.
Yep, I think so. Thanks, Marzel, and thanks to the whole panel of presenters. And again, thank you to all for your attendance. Maybe one closing comment there on price too. I think we hear you. We understand the challenges that those in education face are different than those that we work through with our our industry and production customers. So we really are working on providing the best possible solutions for you to adopt Rockwell solutions into your curriculums and into your training opportunities. So we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thanks again to the presenters. Thanks again to all that were able to join. We really look forward to your feedback. You'll be hearing from us soon on the student work kits, as well as follow-ups from today's presentation. And we look forward to seeing you again in a future session for the Rockwell Automation Education Program Learning Series. So thank you again for your time. Enjoy the rest of your weeks, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.